When Ryan's when it's time to begin, it's on the Rewind Raw with John Pollock and waiting the A-Team. That makes sense that these things we see in the ring every week on TV. It's Rewind Raw for Monday night. Download it Tuesday morning from the Post Wrestling site. It's Rewind Raw for Monday night on USA Now on the John and Wade Take the Mic.
Hello. Welcome everybody to another edition of Rewind Raw. This one hosted by me, Wei Ting. John Pollock is on a scheduled rare day off. If you guys heard Rewind to SmackDown, those of you in the cafe, you might have noticed that he was a little bit under the weather then. Hopefully he's feeling a bit better, but he will return on Wednesday for a double shot of Pollock with Pollock and Thurston and also Rewind to Dynamite. But in his place, I am so honored and so privileged to welcome my man, your man, our man, Neal Flanagan to Rewind to Raw. Welcome.
What an introduction, Way. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm pulling a late one to step in for John, who having a very, very well earned night off. I did wonder at first whether I should pretend to have kidnapped him or something like that, because I was listening to Rewind to SmackDown, and when he, after doing the recap, you don't need told this, but maybe non-patrons do, John sort of left the show at that stage because he really was feeling rather sick. Mm-hmm. And you said, at last I've got rid of him, so I thought, there's something to that.
Mondays are when I feel like I really need a co-pilot here, so I'm sure he's not really that envious of our position tonight. But thank you, Neal, for joining us, and I'm very glad for at least one particular segment that I have an Irishman joining me for tonight's Rewind to Raw.
Don't expect too much, Way, I'm afraid. I know what you're talking about.
Not a problem. We are here, of course. We're going to break down tonight's WWE Raw, but we also have some news stories to get to. And a lot of you guys might not be aware, but outside of occasionally filling in for Rewind to SmackDown with me on these shows, Neal is one of the writers, along with Andrew Thompson, Jack Wanon, John Pollock, of course, who writes news stories on our website. And with John taking a bit of a day off, Neal was actually contributing heavily into the news reporting tonight on the show. So I thought for our news segment, we'd kind of, maybe throw it over to him, at least for the first several stories today, Neal.
Thanks, Way. Yeah, it's a weird one for me to be sort of, taking the reins like this. And I did start the day thinking, this is all very quiet stuff, a couple of injury updates. And then, of course, the bigger stories come a little bit later in the day. And I think the major one to kick off with really is the latest in the Janel Grant lawsuit case. And this is the latest move from the Vince McMahon camp. Now, of course, this case is getting a little bit complicated at this point with the trading of legal filings. So for this story, I'll try to just keep it to the Vince McMahon side of things, even though, of course, the original complaint on January 25th from Janel Grant is against WWE corporately, Vince McMahon, and John Laurinaitis, and there have been various other developments for the other defendants, but in this story is really on the Vince side of things. And attorneys acting for Vince McMahon filed a legal memorandum today with the US District Court, and it asks that apologies. What it does is to oppose Janel Grant's motion to strike inflammatory statements in Vince's request for arbitration. Now, let me just rewind a bit and I'll get my bearings here. I think it's best to go through a timeline. After Janel Grant's original complaint, it took until April 23rd for the McMahon camp to give a formal response. There was a fairly cursory denial, and we had what looked like a kind of planted story in the New York Post about love letters and so on. But on the legal side of things, it took all the way up to April 23rd when McMahon's team lodged a 29-page filing, and it requested that Grant's complaint should not be heard in court, but should go to arbitration, and that would be in line with the original NDA agreement. Arbitration would be a private matter behind closed doors, and I think obviously that would suit Vince McMahon quite well. The next day, on April the 24th, Janel Grant's representation filed a motion asking the court to strike not all, but a huge amount of that 29-page filing from McMahon, because a very large portion of it is called the preliminary statement, in which McMahon's side, his lawyers, basically try to debunk an awful lot of what was in the original complaint. So Janel Grant's representation was saying, look, McMahon did not use this motion in an appropriate manner to argue legal arguments about why it should go into arbitration. He used this preliminary statement as a platform to launch a lot of, incendiary remarks and put Janel Grant's moral character in question, talk about her boyfriend, all this stuff. And they were saying that wasn't necessary or reasonable and should be stricken. So this latest, that gets us to today. And the latest in it is that McMahon has lodged his formal opposition to the motion to strike. And really what it does is actually double down on a lot of the accusations against Grant. That talks about private sexual text messages that were in the original complaint, and that they didn't include any of the plaintiff's responses to those texts. But also notes that Vince deleted all of those texts, so he doesn't have them. But they're confident that this would come out in discovery. And it goes on to list an awful lot more of sort of allegations about what was in responses of texts or texts that Janel Grant had instigated with Vince McMahon, that he was her best friend, the love of her life, etc., etc., etc. A lot of this stuff has been aired already in the story that was in the New York Post. So that's the latest on that case. When they get into the legal stuff, it's basically citing legal arguments and case law to say this motion to strike, our response doesn't have proper legal standing. And that's where we stand. So we've had the original complaint, McMahon's response, a response asking for a lot of that to be stricken, and then today, McMahon's response to that.
So just the next in a line of volleys of these two sides trying to get this case into arbitration. Can we deduce it as that? Vince, of course, responded saying this should be dealt with basically, within the confines of our own sort of setting. Janel Grant's side says, no, it shouldn't. We want it to be, communicated to a larger platform. And this is Vince saying, well, this is why. But specifically to at least new information. I mean, I do think this is maybe more interesting because you have Vince's sides alleging that the reason for those text messages that we've seen are the result of participation from Janel Grant and maybe even prompting an initiation from Janel Grant. Yep. Now, this is all presumably from Vince's own recollection because they've announced that he's deleted all of these texts. I don't know enough about the technology behind these sort of text messages, about whether or not they'd be able to be retrieved, whether or not Janel Grant herself has these on file, or if she's only screenshotted her own or Vince's own responses. But do you have any thoughts just maybe about this kind of new defense or element from of this case?
It's interesting that Vince's side are saying he doesn't have any record of these texts and he deleted them in their terms once the relationship ended. That's his way of phrasing it. Who knows whether that's true or not, or whether a court could even get to the bottom of that. This isn't a police matter at this point; it's a civil one. There may be a federal criminal track at some point, but I think it's not unexpected, I guess, that he would come out and try to say, well, look, these are only the text messages from Vince McMahon. As John has said in the past, however, that aside, and wherever this case goes in the end, those text messages are vile. And I think they in the public court of opinion at least, Endeavour and TKO clearly don't want anything more to do with Vince. I mean, on their own, what he said is bad enough. And what they're alleging in response is really a lot of, that she said she was in love with him, something about, you can read all of these.
Let me read this portion of the actual document here, okay? So now this is from the filing that was made public today. Defendants' communications show not only that the relationship was consensual, but also that in many instances the plaintiff was the initiator. Indeed, while defendant no longer is in possession of the text messages between the parties, as he deleted them when he broke off the relationship, the discovery in this case will show that plaintiff sent him sexually explicit images of herself and texted him to say, among other things, that she was in love with him and he was the love of her life, that he was her best friend, that she wanted to have sex with him, and provided graphic detail, that she fantasized about being held down, enjoyed being in pain, and wanted rough sex, that she wanted defendant to watch her have sex with other people and know about her sex with others, that she wanted defendant to give her thousands of dollars for clothes, plastic surgery, and other gifts, that she wanted to have a future with defendant even after signing the agreement, and that she wanted defendant to keep living in the same building so she could continue to see him even after signing the agreement. Plaintiff sent messages like this to defendant through the entire duration of their relationship, including through the time they signed the agreement in January 2022. Plaintiff presumably still has all of these text messages, but she did not include them in her publicly filed complaint because she wanted to paint a distorted, false picture. It is indeed astonishing that after filing her highly salacious complaint, which omitted the truth about her own conduct, plaintiff now takes issue with purported mudslinging and vicious falsehoods attacking one's moral character in defendant's motion to compel arbitration. Plaintiff cannot have it both ways, and her motion should be denied for these reasons and those set forth herein. So, maybe not a whole lot of for us to be able to actually assess here. This seems to be a continued public battle between the two sides, and we'll see how Janel Grant's side responds. They've been very prompt in their responses, at least through public messaging. So, I'm sure we'll update people on this.
They have, and I think that if we don't get a formal legal response, I imagine that Ann Callis will not be too behind the door and getting something out rather soon about this. But it is striking that they're using what are supposed to be legal documents, making legal arguments based on case law, etc., to just hurl these allegations around. And as you said, Way, if he doesn't have the text messages, he has a very good memory of what was in them, it seems, because we have that list that you just read out.
More on this, I'm sure, this Wednesday with Pollock and Thurston.
Yeah.
And that is the latest for now.
Yes, that brings us on to the latest with the Cash Wheeler road rage / assault with a deadly weapon, which certainly the more dramatic way of putting the case. This has been running on since last summer. It all began with what was even described by the initial judge as a seeming road rage incident on July 27th, 2023. So Wheeler, his real name is Daniel Wheeler, appeared the next day. He was arrested in August for this. So after the event, spent the night in Orange County Jail and then appeared in sort of a prison uniform in his first appearance before the judge on August 18th last summer. And at that hearing, the offence was described as a road rage type incident during which Wheeler allegedly flashed a handgun at another driver. At that time, the defence's request for bond was at $2,500 was accepted. He wasn't remanded into custody or anything like that after that. And indeed, we saw him reasonably quickly back on AEW television. He was later arraigned. That took until February of this year for trial with a date set next week, May 20th. And as early as tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m, pre-trial motions were set to be heard. And now, I could not link in the story to some of the direct documents that came out today, but anyone who cares to, you will find a link to the Orange County Court's records search page, where any member of the public, even from outside the US, can search for Daniel Wheeler, and you can see the latest documentation. It's actually a very brief letter, and it's called Nolle Prosequi, which isn't a fizzy wine. It's a Latin term that means we decline to pursue. And in legalese, it just means the prosecution have decided to drop the charges, not to go ahead. That's it. It's over. This case is finished with. It's interesting because the letter itself simply gives that notice of nolle prosequi and says that the relevant parties in this case, Daniel Wheeler's lawyers and the alleged victim's lawyers, have been advised of such. And that's all it says. So we don't know the reason why the case has been dropped. I did do a little bit of cursory research, not being a lawyer, to see some common reasons why a nolle prosequi might be issued. And it can be a failure of a key witness to cooperate, the desire of the defendant, the desire of the court to give the defendant a second chance because they've completed perhaps some sort of pre-trial program or something like that, new evidence, or just a lack of confidence on the prosecution's case that it has enough evidence to bring the court case to a conviction. We have no idea what has happened here, and we may never know. But in the eyes of the law, Cash Wheeler has always maintained that he's not guilty throughout all of this, and at this point, the case is over.
Mm-hmm. You know, as much as we could say, just as an onlooker, without knowing what evidence was there, what evidence wasn't there, I'm sure this is a huge sigh of relief for both he and for Dax, and maybe for AEW at large. You know, this is one of their biggest properties, and this man, to my knowledge, was at least like the highest penalty was 5 years jail, jail time. So having something like this, I think, you know, hang around him and the entire team, and a member of a value member of this roster at this point, I'm sure was weighing heavily on everybody involved. So whatever the reality of this situation was at this point, I don't think we'll really ever know. But for this guy, you know, he gets to have this, I guess, stricken from his or at least news cycle, and you know, gets to proceed as I think we are all at least happy to see.
And I expect he will say nothing. He has made no public comment throughout the entirety of this.
All right. Lastly, you want to talk a bit about SmackDown ratings?
Yeah, Friday's SmackDown ratings, they hit the lowest mark of the year, but against very stiff opposition, which was the NBA playoff game between the Knicks and the Pacers. I have to remind myself of this because I'm not a massive basketball fan. So courtesy of reporting from Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, SmackDown drew 2,128,000 viewers, which is its lowest of the year, its lowest mark in total viewership, that is, since December 29th of last year. But it's only down 1% on the previous week. And there's some better news in the key 18 to 49 demo, which was a 0.62 and actually an increase there on the previous week. By comparison, the NBA game did a total of nearly 4.5 million viewers, 4,491,000, and a 1.37 in the demo. So, you know, this is not unexpected. I did a little bit of more digging as a WrestleNomics subscriber. And I thoroughly recommend that to anyone who's interested in a bit of deeper dive into these things. I can tell you that SmackDown is still up year over year on this time. Last year, for the average of May, it's up something like 13% so far on 2023. For the first quarter, second quarter, I should say, I think it's up something like so far 8%. So I don't think they're going to be unhappy with this. And this seems to be par for the course at this point in the NBA season. So I don't think they'll be overly worried. The headline is, of course, it's the lowest mark in viewership for the year. But again, probably to be expected.
And they were off a pretty big series of highs, throughout the early part of this year. So, all right. And let's go lastly here to some New Japan Pro Wrestling results from the past weekend. Of course, we had Resurgence taking place on Saturday, and this saw a new champion crown in Gabriel Kidd, defeating Eddie Kingston in a no-rope last man standing match to become the New Japan Strong Openweight champion. The finish came when Kidd suplexed Kingston from the inside of the ring through a table draped between the apron and a guardrail. This was a very, very ugly-looking spot, with Kingston crashing his leg into the guardrail at pretty high velocity. Fightful notes that Kingston got hurt to some extent on the table spot, though he was able to walk to the back with a bad limp. The severity of the injury is unknown at this time, although Fightful's report states that Kingston was battling a legitimate injury even before the match. Kingston has now lost all 3 titles that formerly comprised the Continental Crown. Gabriel Kidd becomes the 6th holder of the Strong Openweight Championship and also the youngest. After the match saw a big angle where Jack Perry, who wrestled earlier on the card, showed up to cause a distraction for the Young Bucks to attack Eddie Kingston. This marked the Young Bucks' first New Japan appearance since the formation of AEW back in 2019. The Bucks and Perry are scheduled to face Eddie Kingston as part of Anarchy in the Arena, taking place at AEW's Double or Nothing pay-per-view on May the 26th. I expect we'll have some sort of update and acknowledgement about whether or not Kingston will be healthy enough to proceed with that match, so let's find out on Wednesday. In the main event of this particular show, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship was successfully defended by Jon Moxley against his former protege Shota Umino in a 34-minute match. After the match, they were both attacked by House of Torture's Evil and Ren Narita. Evil then named himself as the next challenger for Moxley's title before correcting himself and declaring him as the real champion and Moxley as the challenger. He then proceeded to spray paint Moxley's championship with black spray paint. The match was later made official for New Japan's Dominion card in Osaka, taking place on June the 9th, and we have at least some matches that have been announced already for that show, and they are Jon Moxley taking on Evil for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. For the Never Openweight Championship, Shingo Takagi defends against Hanare. The KOPW 2024, is it a belt or trophy now? I'm not even sure.
I think it's a belt these days, isn't it? But
Yuya Uemura defends against the Great O'Khan. The TV Championship sees Jeff Cobb defending against Tomohiro Ishii. And then a tornado tag match for the IWGP and New Japan Strong Tag Team titles. We have Hikuleo and LP taking on Kenta and Chase Owens, taking on TMDK, taking on Bishamon. And then, of course, the Best of the Super Juniors finals. So any of that caught your interest over the past weekend from New Japan?
Well, I didn't see the Resurgence card. Andrew was on duty for that. I have seen the infamous at this point spot with Kingston, and it looks like he couldn't possibly not be injured by that. But obviously, we're hoping for the best for Eddie. Lot to be said for those huge padded barricades. I think that WWE use. It's just one less risk factor. But I guess in these smaller arenas and it's not cost effective, but that just looked absolutely horrible.
Man, I don't know if those barricades would have really made that spot any safer. Honestly, it was it looked pretty rough. So we hope the best, of course, for Eddie Kingston, and look for updates by Wednesday, you think. So that is all the news. PostWrestling.com, where Neal, Andrew Thompson, Jack Wanon holding down the fort while John Pollock is away. And before we get to our Raw review, a message from our lovely sponsors at NordVPN. You know a lot of reasons by now why we love using NordVPN. It allows us access to geo-block services like AEW+. It helps us unlock cheaper prices for pay-per-views. But let's not forget a VPN's most important function, protecting your online privacy. If you do any sort of downloading of content, or if you regularly use Wi-Fi outside of your home, a trusted VPN helps mask your IP to protect your browsing from advertisers, hackers, and even your ISP. And while yes, the protection of a VPN may come with slower browsing speeds, NordVPN happens to be the fastest in the game. Named CNET's fastest VPN of 2024 through their extensive speed tests, Nord clocks an average download speed loss of just 11.1%, compared to Surfshark's 17% and ExpressVPN's 24.8%. Get the protection you need from the most reputable and fastest VPN on the market for just $3 a month. Sign up through nordvpn.com/postwrestling, where listeners can get 4 bonus months on top of all 2-year plans, plus a 30-day money-back guarantee. Again, nordvpn.com/postwrestling. Get your bonus months and let them know you found Nord through us. What did you think of that, Neal?
Awesome. I did have earlier when we were looking at the news rundown, and I thought I might be starting with ratings or ending with ratings. I did have a notion of, wait, do you know of a service that's #1 rated for speed? But anyway,
okay.
Not great. Another time.
Plenty of opportunity in the future, I'm sure, Neal. I think we should consider hiring you to do some of those reads. I mean, I think of all the hosts on our network, you might have my favorite voice.
Oh, don't.
Come on. Seriously, just
as
listen.
Brandon would say, come on, Way. Come
Just
on.
enjoy those tones through your speakers, everybody. This week in the Post Wrestling Cafe, a lot of really pleasant tones to come here. As in the Post Wrestling Cafe, John and I will be back on Thursday for our latest edition of ASK-A-WAI, which is our monthly mailbag. So get your questions in right now at forum.postwrestling.com or memo.fm/postwrestling if you want to get your voice heard on ASK-A-WAI. That's free to submit for anybody. You don't even have to be a Post Wrestling Cafe patron. But also on Thursday, we have the latest and final edition of MCU Later covering X-Men 97. Rich Fann, WH Park will be talking about the season finale of X-Men 97. Have you been keeping up, Neal, at all?
Yes, I have. It took me about 3 weeks, and then I just was like, I binged the first 4 episodes, because the first 2 dropped at the same time. And then I was all in on this. And I'm even going through the original 92 series at this point.
I'm honestly so amazed at the amount of steam this whole thing has kind of picked up for an animated show. It's way more than I think I've expected. So listen to Rich and WH Park, and maybe some guests join them this week on, I believe, Friday, where they'll be talking about it. John and I are back for Rewind to SmackDown on Friday, Collision Course on Saturday, and then on the free feed tomorrow night, we have Up Next. John returns Wednesday for Pollock and Thurston and Rewind to Dynamite. And then on Sunday, we have the main event. The NWA podcast returns, and boy, do those guys have a lot to talk about. I feel like I say that every week, or every month, but this month especially, I feel.
Over, under, Way, 5.5.
So last month, I believe they were at about 5. So they're not into breaking records anymore. I think the record at this point is 6 something. I'm going to say it'll be about 5.5. So listen at 2X, or break it up an hour a day throughout the week. It's, a lovely little sort of a chunk that you just kind of chip off.
It's great, and you've got all month to, if you really want to make it into separate episodes for yourself. So no excuse.
I'm expecting a deep breakdown of Kendrick and Drake, perhaps in the aftermath. All right, let's go to our review tonight of WWE Raw. This one taking place from Greenville, South Carolina. Now, this is not the biggest city, but also one that they don't shy away from mentioning. I don't know if in the past this would have been one of those towns where they'd be just like, we're in South Carolina, everybody, or just name the closest major city. But we're coming from the Ben Secours Wellness Arena, where WrestleTix reports as of a few hours ago, tickets distributed were 8,435 of a setup of 8,600. So at that point of tweeting, short about 165 from a sellout. They did not claim at all on tonight's broadcast that it was a sellout, but nonetheless up from the last time they were at this arena at about 8,000. So we start things off here. Well, first of all, Neal, I kind of want to get a sense, how much are you watching WWE Raw regularly? How often do you watch live? And what did you think about the experience of watching live tonight?
Okay. Generally speaking, I don't watch Raw live anymore. I used to be a bit of a diehard kind of, I can operate on a few hours sleep and I would watch it live. It's been years really since I've done that on any regular basis, simply because it's a school night. Fridays is no issue because you're going into the weekend. I can usually have a bit of a lie in the next day. So my usual consumption of Raw is on a Tuesday. And that means, of course, I can fast forward through quite a lot. The ad breaks, the longer entrances, the recaps, do they have progressive match flow, or is that I think that's just a SmackDown thing, but they do the equivalent of it. And you can really condense the show. So I was feeling it by R3 tonight, I will admit.
Mm-hmm. Do you do the delay and watch, or do you have that capability, or do you actually watch live through the commercials?
I have that capability, and I'll sometimes pause it just to go into the kitchen to grab some water or something like that. But I don't deliberately start late. I think you've got that down to a fine art, haven't you, Wayne?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
I'm a pro at this point, so I'll give you some advice if you choose to do this again.
Okay.
We start things off here with Drew McIntyre. He comes out, and it's also worth noting that they now have the King and Queen of the Ring crowns on display in these lovely display cases by the entrance ramp here. The CM Punk chants immediately start at Drew, and Drew shuts them down by saying Punk isn't showing up to Greenville, South Carolina. He only makes the big towns. And that was true. There is no CM Punk on tonight's show. Drew brings up Punk's infamous line saying the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist. But the greatest trick CM Punk ever pulled, he says, was looking like a drug addict without actually taking drugs. And also his ability to get you to trust him no matter how many times he breaks your trust. That includes the management. That includes the fans. He says CM Punk fans are stupid for buying his shit. Drew brings up, well, he didn't say shit, I added that. Drew brings up Punk's trick over the past few weeks. He accuses Pierce of helping Punk avoid him in repeated instances, starting from the press box and also last week when Drew pulled out of the parking lot just as CM Punk came in. He says he's not going to waste his time dealing with a guy who won't be cleared for 20 years. And then he moves on to Jey Uso, who, of course, replaced him in the King of the Ring tournament last week. He says Jey took his spot. He'll deal with him later. But now his focus is on the championship. So rather than wasting his time with this King of the Ring, Drew is just skipping the line entirely. He's just going for the title. He calls Damian Priest a paper champ. And, before we proceed, any thoughts on just Drew McIntyre's portion of this particular segment?
Terrific. I'm one of Drew's biggest fans at the moment. He's a real reason to tune in, and when he kicked off the show, it sort of kept my energy levels pretty high. I love all the Punk stuff. He can really hold his own. It's great, and we'll get to the Priest interaction, but it feels like he's really keeping a lot of irons in the fire and doing a great job with it, because he still says he'll deal with Jey Uso at some point. He didn't kind of just blow that off as meaningless. But he's now got his eyes on Punk, and he's got his eyes on this championship. So Priest really wasted no time, and as soon as his name was mentioned,
Damian Priest comes out, and Drew says that Priest deserves his success for all his years of hard work. He just doesn't deserve to be champion. He says Priest knows that he can't beat him, so that's why he used the Money in the Bank briefcase. And Priest comes back saying, stop making excuses. He tells Drew to look in the mirror and blame that asshole. That one he did actually say. Priest says he wanted to cash in on Seth, but Drew stopped him multiple times, so it's really all Drew's fault. Drew was so focused by Punk at Mania that he made Punk more important than leaving and celebrating with his own wife, and he got beaten by a one-armed man. Priest, at this point, just grants him a title shot and says that he'll make Drew eat his words by calling him, when he called him a paper champion, and his new catchphrase, at least tonight, seems to be, y'all can rise to that.
Yeah.
Would you wear a y'all can rise to that shirt, you think?
Absolutely not. Not in 100 years, but I'm sure there are people who would. So I fully expect it to be on WWE Shop.
We'll see if it's the new yeet. Y'all can rise to that.
I did enjoy Drew's story that he respects a Priest's story. It's inspirational. but his neighbor Dave has an inspirational story, and he doesn't mean he should be champion. Drew's just terrific at the moment, but Damian Priest did a really good job. That's not an easy task to hold your own with 2020 early 2024 Drew McIntyre, and I think Priest did a pretty good job.
I agree. We already know what Drew's capable of at this point. For me, this was a chance to see how Damian Priest can rise to the occasion against a top-level promo like Drew McIntyre. And I thought, Priest showed some pretty good confidence here. This is him opposing maybe the best promo guy in the company right now. And I thought he held his own, delivered his lines well, presence was there, confidence was there. I would say if this was a test, Priest did pretty well. I'm a lot more interested in this program already than the Damian Priest Jey Uso one. I think the heel babyface division is a bit clearer here, even though technically I think Priest is still in your tweener space, but he's very much operating like a babyface, just in terms of morality, in terms of just the content of this promo against Drew McIntyre, for instance. And I already think this promises to be a feud with a bit more depth in storytelling than the Jey Uso feud, because both guys have already engaged in quite a bit of history. We know, first of all, that they were of course embroiled in some sort of tag team feud, and then they went out for drinks together. Remember that was brought up, and then from that came all this other stuff. Of course, the Money in the Bank cash in, and I think just what we saw was a pretty good glimpse at some promos that might take place between the two.
Yeah, and I totally agree that in this segment, at least, Damian Priest.
Sorry, I'm mistaken. He went out for drinks with Jey. I'm sure he went out for drinks at some point with Drew as well. But anyway,
they're bound to have, kayfabe. But I would say that I agree with you that this was a very clear positioning. This segment, at least, we got something a little different later when Carlito gets sort of involved with the Judgment Day, but Priest positioned kind of firmly as a sort of badass but babyface in this segment, and I thought, okay, they're continuing to inch him along that road.
We get recap videos of the Queen of the Ring up until in the preview of every single quarterfinals match here, and I thought these video packages were really well done. They have a movie trailer voice guy doing them, and they include, of course, recaps of the matches that took place on the house shows, including Maxine Dupree, who replaced an injured Zelina Vega very late into the week, losing to Shayna Baszler in what looked to be pretty quick fashion. So we have up next a quarterfinal match involving Shayna Baszler versus IYO SKY. The match starts off when Shayna sneak attacks IYO mid-entrance following a pull-apart in the parking lot earlier in the day. This is where Michael Cole gets into his cage match mode, and he spoke about these two previously competing against one another in Stardom. Of course, also a bit of a rivalry in NXT. We got our latest QR code here, and I don't know if you ever looked into this, Neal, or not, but
a little bit. I didn't go down the rabbit hole of trying to work it out for myself. I just looked on Twitter to see what it ultimately led to, and I saw some photographs. There's an old style floppy disk with the word "witch" written on it, and I think Thursday's date and a time of 4 p.m. So that's interesting. Yes, and some USB drives. But I mean, I have no clue what any of this means, or what could be happening on Thursday at if indeed that is Thursday the 16th. Okay. Yes, it is at 4 p.m. What I found also interesting was that they acknowledged the QR code for possibly the first time, or at least the first time that I really noticed. That the commentary team were saying there's one of those strange things again, and then Pat's like, yeah, this has been happening, whereas to the best of my knowledge, for the most part at least, they've been ignoring these, they haven't acknowledged them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I noticed that too. So, I mean, the fact that they are acknowledging it on commentary, and also the fact that they're not giving us a destination to actually, wait for something, Thursday, 4 p.m., I'm assuming Eastern time, tells us that we're probably ramping pretty close to maybe this reveal actually happening. I hope. I kind of think it's about time. So we'll see. We await the maybe it's some sort of investors report. Yeah, we'll see. Shayna controls the match here with Io draping her arm over the top rope, focusing her attack on Io's left arm and shoulder. Shayna wraps Io's arm around the underframe of the ring and kicks it. Shayna's knee now gets trapped on the top rope, and allows Io to take control through a second commercial break. The over the moonsault is blocked, but Io very impressively executes a Lama Hestral into a European clutch, but that's immediately countered by Shayna into a Kirifuda clutch as Io escapes into a crossface, but with Shayna ending the sequence with the running knee for 2. Excellent work from these two. Io dragon screws to target Shayna's knee again, then successfully lands the over the moonsault to advance. I thought a hell of a match between these two. I think Io's been really exciting to watch lately. She's done some adjustment of her style, to my notice, where she's been working a lot faster and a lot more fan friendly and a lot more dynamic. And I definitely feel like we're getting like the Io Shirai that I think has been hyped now on the main roster, and I find it kind of interesting that it kind of took her losing the championship in order for her to actually get there. But I thought she was spectacular to watch here. Great limb work from Shayna. I thought she brought out the best in her. What do you think?
I really enjoyed this match, and it sort of kept my energy levels again quite high. I thought easily the best tournament match on either Raw or SmackDown so far. I think they really wanted to get some of those preliminary matches out of the way for time reasons, probably more than anything, but they gave this a lot of time. Long competitive match, both of them did brilliantly, and it did make me. My mind did wander to January and Raw being on Netflix, and whether or not we're going to get to see the entirety of these matches, because that's one with the commercial break, I would quite like to have seen the entire thing.
Yeah, I imagine advertising space is still going to be a big priority, even on Netflix. But I'm very curious to see if they'll be like 3 minutes in length, the way that they are now, and if like people who could pay for a higher subscription tier can opt out of them, So that'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, that's my big question. Is that on Netflix, if you're I believe if you're like on their premium tier, it's ad free, even for all the live stuff that they dabbled with so far. Yeah. So I just think it'll be interesting, but I'm sure you're right. That with the especially post TKO takeover, anything that they can do to advertise anything, they will.
After the match, Io cuts a big promo in Japanese, presumably about wanting to win the Queen of the Ring. This was like a very international edition of WWE Raw, where everybody kind of gave us little promos in their own native languages. We have the Judgment Day backstage. Dom continues to try to get Priest to accept Carlito into the group. Carlito says, "Hey, why don't you let me in? We all hate Rey Mysterio. Rhea's gone. Dominic is injured. You can use the extra muscle." Priest says, "If the rest of the Judgment Day want to work with you, then cool, but I am not cool with you." Carlito leaves, but says even the most stubborn minds can change. So easily the most I've heard Carlito speak since he's come back to the WWE. I find him so much more interesting already interacting with heels in the Judgment Day than like sort of this like directionless role that he kind of had, until the end with the LWO. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, he got that big pop at, a year ago at Backlash in Puerto Rico, and it was just treading water ever since, I think, just eating the apple and all the rest of it. And although, way as you've said, and we've discussed previously, the build up to the heel turn was so by the numbers, so basic in the end. At least we're here, and I think this is a far better spot for Carlito.
And he's interestingly shaved off his mustache while Dominic has grown one. So I don't know if there's like a one mustache per group rule in the Judgment Day. But interesting new facial hair look for Carlito and especially for Dominic.
Sick of getting pieces of apple in his beard or in his mustache.
Could be it. Could be it, yeah. More on this a bit later. We check up with the Alpha Academy as Chad Gable chastises poor Maxine for blowing her opportunity at the Queen of the Ring over the weekend. Gable had some matches booked tonight, and they are Otis versus Sami Zayn and he wants the serious Otis tonight. He does not want the Caterpillar guy. Meanwhile, he's got Tozawa taking on Bronson Reed, and Gable warns him too about making sure not to dance tonight. So Ivy Nile at this point shows up and asks why Maxine didn't ask her to train. Maxine says that she's been told that she's not allowed to train with anybody outside of the academy anymore. As Gable breaks them up, Gable tells Nile that she has too much potential to waste with Taylor Not So Swift.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Chad Gable heel character at this point?
I'm quite enjoying it. We all know where this is headed, and it's probably going to be a slower burn than some of us would like, with the Alpha Academy getting their own back on him. But it was okay. It's just a little slip from I do like Gable. I think he's very good in this role. A little slip at the beginning where he got the match wrong. I think he originally said Otis would be taking on Bronson Reed, and then he said no. Almost as though he handled it well, almost as though he changed his mind. I'm going to put, you're the stronger guy. You've got to soften up Sami Zayn for me. So he saved himself there. I'm quite liking this dynamic too with Ivy Nile and Maxine. And again, hopefully they don't take too long to get to the obvious end destination.
Yeah. I've actually, when Chad Gable was involved in all that stuff with Sami Zayn, like I've really, especially when he was a babyface about to coach, he was coaching and then facing Sami Zayn, I loved that seriousness of that Chad Gable, and I was almost hoping that even as a heel, he would retain a lot of that seriousness. Yeah. He's more of a slapsticky villain, I would say, attached to this Alpha Academy. But I don't mind it because I find it fun. I find it like very effective, even if it's not the Chad Gable tone that I think I was hoping for. Yeah. I'm actually most impressed by like how they managed to, through this heel Chad Gable, put a lot of like good focus on people that are surrounding him, like an Otis, like a Maxine, like an Ivy Nile, even, who I think are all benefiting pretty well and developing like pretty good audience reactions as a result of this heel Chad Gable. So we'll see how that goes. We get a recap of the men's King of the Ring as we check in with the New Day. Of course, Kofi beat Ray at a house show over the weekend to advance as well. Kofi reiterates his wanting to win this King of the Ring for Xavier Woods, who is injured, shows up with a crutch. Woods laments not being able to defend his King of the Ring because of Gunther and says Kofi will do it tonight. A very special little kind of moment here with Samantha Irvin introducing Lillian Garcia. Now, I don't know if like she just happened to be close, nearby or something, but no real rhyme or reason for this, but it was just a nice little moment of Samantha Irvin introducing Lillian Garcia, who introduces us to our next match. Lillian, before she does, though, puts Samantha over. Lillian says Samantha's doing an incredible job and she's proud of her. I found this really heartwarming, We've seen Howard Finkel kind of get this treatment on like WrestleManias and like sort of big stages, but tonight seeing Lillian Garcia kind of like put into that status, and I thought it was like a really nice little, almost like passing of the torch moment between these two female announcers.
Agreed, it was really nice, yeah, and I had the same thought as you. This wasn't trailed on social media or anything like that, even. So I got the impression Lillian may live nearby. She may have just happened to be in town and they decided just perhaps even today to do this. So yeah, it was nice. I was glad though that she wasn't announcing a champion. Yeah, that's a terrible impression of a woman, which I instantly regret. But yeah,
is that one of her signatures?
The following match is for the whatever insert name. Championship.
I did not realize. All right. A very, very good
a terrible
reproduction there.
Sorry.
Let's go to the back here with Adam Pearce. He's with the Awesome Truth, and Kiana James at this point walks in, making her official WWE main roster debut. She tells us that she'll be working under Adam Pearce's tutelage here. She leaves, but before she does, she says she never hesitates. She adjudicates, as R-Truth mistakes the word adjudicate for a very dirty word that he questions whether or not is PG worthy. What do you think of this role for Kiana James to kind of ease her way into the main roster with.
An interesting one, and not one that I expected. It's the old Sonya Deville role, isn't it? And she seems to be stepping into sort of Adam's co-GM or something. So I don't know if there's a real reason for this, perhaps an injury or anything like that, or whether it's simply a creative direction. But it, I suppose, gives Kiana James some meaningful screen time. And we've seen some difficult call-ups from NXT, so, it might be interesting.
Whatever the case, I think this is a great way to introduce somebody from NXT, unfortunately, we've seen enough Alba Fires and Tiffany Stratton is an exception, but more often than not, people get called up from NXT and they're just they just enter the pack and they remain somewhat faceless. Having a speaking role, a regular speaking role, and a regular character is way more valuable to an upcoming wrestler than just being a member of the roster. Even if you do get to wrestle, it's way more valuable for her to showcase her personality and to let people remember her for just being a character of some substance rather than just another face. So I'm excited to see how she performs in this role. Up next, we have a men's qualifying match, quarterfinal match, I should say, between Gunther and Kofi Kingston. Kofi is full of fire. Of course, he's looking for revenge for Xavier Woods. As Gunther enters the ring, Kofi swarms with the big dive, then targets Gunther's right knee early on. The match hasn't even started yet. When the bell finally rings, I'm not sure how this ref allowed this match to go on, by the way.
I know. And why he started it when he started it instead of checking whether Gunther could compete. But, yeah.
We've seen refs stop matches and delay them for less. Anyway,
Absolutely.
Gunther is on one leg as Kofi hits a top rope boom drop for a 2. Another tope is caught by Gunther on the floor, and Gunther at this point just destroys Kofi Kingston. Huge chop, drops him on the barricade, drops him on the table, and then delivers a Boston Crab and a half crab to Kofi as we go to break. Really great start to this one. We come back. Gunther slows the pace down after the commercial break, continues the work on Kofi's lower back. He delivers a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker, but at this point, Gunther ends up subtly showing some pain on his own knee as a result of the impact. Gunther misses a diving elbow drop, and this allows Kofi to continue focusing on Gunther's knee. On the floor, Kofi counters a powerbomb and Rana's Gunther into the post. We get a great 10 count tease on the floor with Gunther, tripping at 8.5 as he makes his way to the ring before actually making it in at about 9.9. The Trouble in Paradise is countered with a Gunther powerbomb and a Boston Crab, and the cumulative work on Kofi's back all matches enough to make Kofi tap. What did you think about this match?
I really enjoyed it. I thought this is, at this point, I'm like, this is a hell of a Raw. These two tournament matches have been terrific. I still gave the edge ever so slightly to the first one because I felt that there was more of a toss-up in who's going to win. I was never particularly in doubt that Gunther was going to emerge victorious here, but they did a tremendous job of with the pre-match thing of the limb damage, great selling. These are two tremendous wrestlers, and I was very impressed with Kofi, who I haven't seen do a great deal, lately. And so this was, I think Gunther's so good. He's good with everybody. And, Kofi's a seasoned vet at this stage. It was, really good TV match, better than I've seen lately.
Yeah, this was, for me, my match of the night. I thought it was a great match, one of the better tournament matches. What's been a really, as far as King of the Rings go, this has been a really strong one in ring. I think it's, for me, very safe to say that there's really no one that Gunther doesn't have incredible chemistry with. Maybe we can also safely say the best in-ring performer in the company, bell to bell. And I mean, Maybe Ilja Dragunov can compete. Maybe some others on that list. But man, at least on Raw, he's outstanding. They did a great job telling those body part stories with both men. Him, like Gunther, slowing the pace is just, it's a very sort of like WWE style thing, but he does it so well. And I think for me, it's because the technique is so clean and the moves are so thoughtfully done, especially when he's focused on a body part. Even when he's working that slow heel pace, I still find it very captivating. I also love the emphasis on Kofi's motivation before this match. It wasn't just kind of, Kofi being dragged out here to slaughter. Like, they gave Kofi backstory and some real motivation to win, and they presented it to make you think that this might be somebody who actually has a chance. He emphasizing his goal to do this for revenge for Xavier Woods just kind of makes that loss that much more like emotionally weighted and tragic. So I really liked all that.
Yeah, even the sort of post-match comment that we know the Crown won't be staying with the New Day. In fact, of course, with Zelina also injured, both 2021 previous Crown holders are injured and not competing. So.
Wow, new champions coming. We got caught up in the back with Lyra Valkyria, and Valkyria says last week was a perfect way to kickstart her Raw stay. Says anytime Becky needs some help, she's there. Becky walks in, says thanks. Liv Morgan then interrupts and welcomes Lyra, says she's going to have some fun on Raw, but asks, has Becky always been such a bitch? Becky, she must have just been walking around in circles, because she shows up right behind Liv Morgan, and Becky at this point decks Liv just like she did Dominic, and she's not afraid of a face-to-face fight. Bitch. So
two bitches, yeah.
Two bitches being used here. As like, is this a sign of the lack of the PG era, or have they been always this sort of
I'm not sure. The asshole got blanked earlier on from Drew, but they allowed him to say it, so could be. And they've definitely lent into injury. By injury, I mean like flesh wounds, blood, basically. Much more lately, we get a bit of that. It's a tiny bit, but we get it with Jey Uso later, and they zoom in. Whereas, I think the no color edict before was so strict that they actually, do you remember? I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but do you remember one of the NXT takeovers? I think it was the one in London.
Joe.
That they just stopped the match between Balor and Joe to get some staples in there. Yeah, so.
Yeah. All right. Up next, we've got Kofi in the back. Karrion Kross taunts him about the loss. Says there's always time to turn things around. Woods and Kofi look concerned about these villains talking to them. So, unfortunately, it looks like the New Day are on a Final Testament duty from this point on. So, good luck to them, and try to make that work. Yeah. Bronson Reed takes on Akira Tozawa here. Tozawa starts this one off fast. He dives off the top, but gets quickly caught in Death Valley Driver. Tsunami. Reed gets the win. Afterwards, Gable berates Tozawa in what's not going to be a great night for the Alpha Academy. Kathy Kelly is in the back with Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser. Kelly questions the legitimacy of Gunther's wins with Kaiser's cheating involved. Kaiser says if Sheamus thinks he lost because of him, well, he's delusional. Sheamus should be thanking Kaiser for saving him because he'll never ever beat Gunther. Kaiser basically then challenges Sheamus to a match, so it looks like this is our follow-up feud for Sheamus, who did not make his way onto the Tonight Show.
No, I thought this was going to be another turnaround and he's standing there moment, but it was a good way to give Ludwig some face time. We go back with Gunther, but Gunther pretty much walks out of shot straight away. And Ludwig Kaiser's, he's quite captivating on the.
He's such a fun, he's an over the top promo, but in the best way, so much fun and fun to hear. Like when he gets big enough, everybody's gonna have a Ludwig Kaiser impersonation. The way, who is it? Who does it? Pat? Somebody's debuted it on commentary recently.
I'm not sure. It might
maybe
be
Corey. Corey, I think so. Jackie is in the back with Adam Pearce as New Catch Republic show up. Bate thanks Pearce for the opportunity tonight as Pearce announces a fatal four-way for a title shot at the Tag Team Champions. Jackie then asks why Bronson Reed wasn't in the King of the Ring tournament. And Pearce...
Braun Breaker.
Or sorry, Braun Breaker. Thank you. We've got Bronson Reed, Braun Breaker, and Braun Strowman on the very same show. So thank you for your help there, Neal. Pierce says he didn't put Bronson Reed into the tournament because sorry, I did it again. He didn't want to put Braun Breaker into the deep end upon first entry. So not the excuse I expected, when he dragged Braun Breaker into his room last night. I'd be curious to know how that conversation went.
Yeah, it didn't seem like...
I got excited. I thought I thought he was going to say, I didn't put you in this because I have this for you. And he did not. He just wants Braun Breaker hanging out in the back for these first few weeks, I guess, because Braun Breaker shows up, says the others would have been in the deep end with him and not the other way around. And he says Pierce should have put him in the tournament. So
yeah, it got very dark. He said they'd be in the deep end with him and he would watch them drown and smile.
Right.
Very dark,
yes,
very dark.
yes.
Braun Breaker.
It's pretty apparent to me that Braun Breaker has nothing going on for the next pay-per-view at least. So
Looks that way.
I think we got to wait till after King and Queen of the Ring to see what he's up to. Queen of the Ring match time, quarterfinals. It's Lyra Valkyria taking on Zoey Stark. Valkyria dives off the apron and she jams her knee, which allows Zoey Stark to take control until the commercial break. A bit more action here, back and forth, with a Z360 countered into the Nightwing for the victory as Valkyria advances into the semifinals against IYO SKY next week. What did you think about the match itself?
I think by comparison to the matches up to this point, it was lacking a little. Some of that was crowd energy, although as we alluded to earlier on, for an NXT call-up, Lyra was getting decent reaction from the crowd. They were doing the woos during her entrance theme. There was at least a light sprinkling of chants during the match. But I didn't think it was great compared to what we saw earlier on in either of the other two matches.
Crowd started off pretty cool for this one, but they did end up with a pretty decent reaction by the end here. Jackie speaks to Lyra after the match, and Lyra says she's very confident because as she proceeds to speak a phrase in Gaelic. Any clue what she might have said?
Okay, first, my only complaint is that Michael Cole called this Gaelic and said that it's from the Scottish Highlands, which is not correct, Michael. It's that's more. There is a language called, more usually pronounced, Scots Gaelic, but Irish is not the same language. And I'm afraid
is that on the level of Shinto?
Well, there are some annoyed people on Twitter. If you want to search Twitter for Lyra and the word Irish or Gaelic, you'll get some people saying, "How dare you, Michael Cole? Make an example of him, Adam Pearce." These obviously people who think the general manager is a real thing. But anyway, this is all avoidance on my part because my Irish is absolutely abysmal and I don't know what it was she said. And I did search. I did a Twitter search to see if anyone on this island, apart from me, was still awake, who does have good Irish, who would be able to translate it. All I heard was Naheran or Erin at the very end of the sentence, which is Ireland. So it's something like "you'll never beat the Irish" or something like that. But she's very much leaning into that kind of fighting Irish identity.
Okay, well, maybe we'll find out definitively next week if she does, in fact, win. Do you have a pick? We've got IYO SKY taking on Lyra Valkyria next week.
I think they've given Lyra a nice push to begin with to get her onto the main roster. But I still think IYO wins the day in the semi.
Mm-hmm. I think overall they've done a pretty good job here with Lyra Valkyria in these 2 weeks alone. Making the connection to Becky Lynch and just kind of, giving us a bit of an identity to her. For at the very least, we know her as the sidekick or friend of Becky Lynch. They have not at least made such a big deal of her previously beating Becky Lynch yet, although I'm sure as the weeks progress, as they, where that feud might actually come into play, they will ramp that point up. But her strength is her in-ring. Her promo at this point still feels a little bit like overly smiley babyface, but that's not so, not the worst thing, especially if you can wrestle, which she definitely can.
So who do you have for the semi Fann?
So I think a lot of it depends. Well, I think Jade goes all the way through on the other side. Jade versus Lyra is a possibility, but I think Jade versus IYO might be the more likely match because I think Jade beating IYO is a bigger deal. I guess having Lyra claim that she made it to the finals is also a big deal, but I don't know. I think Jade versus IYO I see a bit more. You also have a veteran in there with Jade instead.
Yes.
So I see IYO going all the way against Jade.
That's good logic, Way. I like your thinking. And also, of course, they've got damage control to do a bit of interference, so it doesn't take too much away from Lyra.
Jey Uso is in the back, and he cuts a big promo. I find he's getting more and more confident with these sort of unique promos every single week, finding his voice. Then we got Sami Zayn taking on Otis here, and throughout the match, Otis has to fight the urge to do the caterpillar. The crowd is cheering for it. Gable warns him not to, and Otis finally gives in. He takes the shirt off. He does the damn move. Otis then goes to Vader Splash, but Sami Zayn moves out of the way and delivers a huluva kick for a very quick win here. Very simple match. I actually thought Otis fighting the urge to caterpillar was actually very amusing here.
It was quite funny, yeah. And the crowd, I think he got the nice pop when he took the shirt off, and it reminded us of Otis in the days of being a bit of a fan favourite. He has been in the background of Alpha Academy for a while, which speaks to what you said earlier on about this, pantomime villain of Chad Gable. At least it's giving shine to, it's bringing Otis more to the fore, I guess.
I would say it's been pretty effective so far, because as Gable berates Otis, he even shoves Otis's head at one point. It prompts Sammy to come back into the ring, delivers an exploder to Gable in the corner, but Gable escapes the huluva kick. Afterwards, Gable again slaps Otis on the aisle, and the crowd was very loud for Otis. So they're really kind of building this this desire from the audience to want to see Otis finally attack Gable or turn on him.
Yeah, and I got the impression that Otis had said, look, I'm fine, lay it in, Chad, because that was a hell of a slap, or at least it looked like it. In contrast, I don't want to take us back too far, but I thought that Becky's punch was almost comedic. It was this kind of like retractable fist sort of thing.
Well, the Dominic one looked so good and probably felt it. But yeah, this one not as much. We got Braun Strowman in the back. He's hanging out with the Creeds, and I don't know what Strowman's doing here. Now on Raw, it just seems like he's just hanging out and being like, "Hey guys, welcome. Yo. Hey, it's great to be here." That seems to be his role. He tells the Creeds and Ivy that they have a great career ahead of them, as if Strowman is I guess he's a veteran at this point, but he's just there welcoming people. JD walks up from behind him and gives him a warning about getting involved in Judgment Day business, and that's about as much as we got from him. Dakota Kai versus Becky Lynch. This was just a sort of a non-title match that was announced earlier in the day. Damage control caused a distraction to allow Kai to take control. A very noticeable blown few spots here between the two with some miscommunication as Kai goes for her running boot in the corner. Kai takes a hold and they regroup and they redo the spot as we go to commercial break. Becky superplexes Kai into an armbar. They reverse pinfalls as Becky launches into the disarmer. Io and Kyrie then attack to cause a DQ as Lyra comes in to make the save, and then Liv Morgan comes in from behind to attack Becky Lynch. What did you think about the match?
It was okay. I will admit at this point my energy was beginning to flag a little bit. And after such great matches to begin the show, the expectation level was beginning to drop. And, the interference finish, the bell, the match being thrown out. It's all just really to further this storyline. So it's okay.
Of the tournament
fine.
match. Yeah. Of all the matches on the show, definitely on the weaker side, but I saw good response to this one as well online. So maybe your mileage may vary. Ilja Dragunov is in the back. He's here to make an impact. Right, night in and night out. He wants to be the czar of the ring. And he's going to beat Jey Uso tonight to face Gunther in the semifinals. And this is where they remind us, or he reminds us, that he beat Gunther previously. So very much, I mean, as they should, but they're making a big deal out of the prior history between these two. He says it's not over between the two of them as Gunther walks up and they have a stare down. So very much teasing this as a big match coming up for us.
And even out of the ring, I'm loving Gunther because he just, stares him out a little bit, smirks at him, walks off. It's all it needed.
Yeah, they're like already kind of promoting this as like a big future match between Ilja Dragunov and Gunther. And for Ilja Dragunov, what like the transition from NXT to the main roster has already, I think, been incredibly strong. Not just the great Ricochet match last week, but here tonight getting the main event spot and also teeing up a future match that already indicates like a long storied rivalry with Gunther is huge for a guy just coming off of NXT. So they've done a great job with him. Then we get our fatal four-way match for a tag title shot here between the Authors of Pain, the New Catch Republic, Finn Balor and JD McDonough, and the Creeds. There's a lot of focus I found here on Julius Creed. He goes on a big run, ends with a big jump up, superplex to Balor for a 2 count. Everybody at this point just kind of gets into the action with their big spots. Bate lifts up Akam and delivers his helicopter spin to some very loud applause. We get a double Tyler driver from New Catch Republic for a 2 count. Carlito at this point comes out here and attacks Pete Dunne. He delivers a backstabber to Pete Dunne on the table and then ends up like holding his own back. Poor Carlito here. Coup de grace from Finn Balor to Bate gets the win as a result of the Carlito interaction. So what do you think about the match?
I enjoyed this because it's, I think it was the right spot in the show to have kind of a really high-paced, chaotic match like this. So, yeah, it certainly grabbed my attention. And again, furthers these storylines. I mean, I was kind of, could have maybe done without AOP. Triple threat might have been all right, but no, some good power spots that Akam and Reservo used for at least.
They have not made much of an impression on me, to be honest with you.
And they never have with me, I've got to say.
For guys that I think like fulfill, I think a much needed role in the tag team division, like they're just like your two heavies, like your meat tag team, Yeah. They just seem awfully generic, and I don't know if that's just because they're part of a very generic group, but they just have not felt special to me. Nor has I think Paul Ellering really added anything to their presentation. So. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how they do.
He doesn't really do or say anything. He just sort of comes out wearing that silly T-shirt, and we're on the same. I'm not going to labour the point why we're on the same page as regards. Yeah.
This seemed to be like a glimpse into like the new state of the tag division on Raw, with some continued spotlights on Julius Creed here, a bit from New Catch Republic. Yeah. So Judgment Day are number one contenders. They will be taking on the Awesome Truth. I don't think they said when, did they?
No. It may be on Saturday week in Saudi, but I feel like if it was on Raw next week, they would have announced it.
Ricochet shows up here to wish Ilja Dragunov good luck tonight, and also says it's not over between the two of them. Notable because of
his bling, his suit.
Ricochet's fit tonight. Okay,
his drip.
I kind of his drip. I mean, you're a fashion plate yourself, Neal Flanagan. I wanted to get your take. Man, I can't bring up a photo here, but anyway, you saw it. What did you think of his suit and glasses?
WH would be your man for the breakdown of this. I guess it's not ring gear, but yeah, I mean for a short backstage speaking part, Ricochet went all out here. 3-piece suit, the waistcoat, the chain, blingy glasses, jewelry.
I'm loving it. It. And see, this is like one of those things where I wonder if in the Vince McMahon era this would have made air. Maybe infamously, like Pat McAfee wearing shorts was of some concern.
That's right.
Not from Vince, but from Michael Cole, for fear that Vince didn't like it.
That's right.
Now, what would a Vince McMahon have said about this Ricochet outfit with these glasses and this necklace, I wonder, and this plaid suit?
Too much. God damn it.
Well, I love it. He should wrestle like this in these glasses. Should be great. So I mean, already this continued focus on Ilja Dragunov and building these characters around him, making Dragunov feel like a big deal. They again in 2 weeks, I've really been very impressed with that. Priest and Dominic, they're in the back. Priest asks very interestingly, Priest and Dominic have a bit of an interaction. Priest asks, "Hey, are we good?" And before Dominic can really give an answer, Carlito comes out here celebrating with JD and Finn Balor. And Priest at this point says, "Carlito, what happened out there was cool." Priest tells him not to let him down when he tries to take care of Ray. So Carlito is slowly winning Damian Priest over, and they are introducing at least the idea of some tension between Dominic and Damian Priest.
Yeah, and I had to listen to this again because I thought he originally said, "Are things good with you and Rhea?" And I thought that can't be what he's saying because they're obviously going to keep Rhea out of the picture at the moment. So your version of what happened here makes a lot more sense than my notes because I was wondering why are they invoking Rhea's name at this point?
Well, you could be right. I mean, I mean they. I actually might have misheard, but chat room, let us know if maybe you heard differently. Of course, they are introducing the Dominic and Liv Morgan storyline in the background. This could be an allusion to it, but it was almost like so quick that it was very quick. Now Matt in the chat room says he heard Rhea, so maybe you're more right.
But it did feel like almost a throwaway line before they got to the meat of this, which was Carlito.
They've been very subtle though with these Liv Morgan. Well, as subtle as like you would expect of the WWE with these Liv Morgan and Dominic interactions. So interesting. All right. Lastly, we have the main event here. Jey Uso taking on Ilja Dragunov for the quarterfinals to face Gunther. A big deal is made now of the Fireflies being a part of Jey Uso's entrance. And this has been mentioned in reports from Fightful as well as just online, with Jey Uso acknowledging that the Fireflies are now his. They dimmed the lights to encourage them as they did in Lyon. And the announcers are calling them the Yeet Lights.
Yeet Lights, yeah.
Yeah. It's a great looking entrance, and having these cell phones just kind of adds to that presentation. Dragunov puts Jey onto a table. He goes to H-bomb him from the barricade, but Jey gets out of the way and tackles Dragunov back onto the table as we go to, or back onto and off of the table as we go to commercial. We come back with the Yeet Boo as Dragunov hits the Constantine special for a 2 count. The camera at this point zooms into Jey Uso's ear, showing that his piercing is bleeding here from some sort of impact. Dragunov then delivers the H-bomb and Jey kicks out at 2. Jey gets up, hits the Uso splash for the win. Your thoughts on the match?
Good main event. And to cap off a Raw that was quite wrestling heavy and had some really good wrestling matches. So I don't want to sign off too early, but I'm glad that this was the edition of Raw that I landed on, Way, because I've seen a few of late that weren't really worth staying up for. And I feel like this one was. It was a very good main event. And I actually went into this match feeling that they could hand the win to Ilja, so it made it that bit more intriguing to me. I think a lot of people would probably be surprised at that, but it's like you said, they are making a big deal of him. They are pairing him with Gunther, it looks like. I just felt there was at least a chance that he might have advanced in the tournament, so that made it more interesting too.
The fact that we could even feel that way about somebody who just came up from NXT, I think, is already like a huge testament to what they've done with Ilja Dragunov. And even in the end here, as Gunther walks and makes his way to the ring to have a face-off with Jey Uso, he does share a glance with Ilja Dragunov. So they are continuing to hold onto that and present that as a match that the audience should anticipate and wait for in the future. But next week we've got Jey Uso versus Gunther. It's a rematch, of course. They have a stare down to close the show. So maybe just kind of my thoughts on Jey Uso versus Ilja Dragunov. I've been pretty critical on some of Jey Uso's matches. But I thought tonight was a good example of, I think, what somebody like Ilja Dragunov can bring to the crowd reaction that a Jey Uso, has. I thought like Ilja Dragunov introduced what I felt was a more hard-hitting sort of style, and that kind of made me a bit more interested in the Jey Uso. I don't think I don't know if I want to say like he works a bit jumpy and a bit light, but like I just really at least thought the like Ilja Dragunov kind of added a lot to, you know, what I might usually criticize about a Jey Uso match. Not near the sort of caliber of the Ricochet match from last week, but like still a very good main event. And overall, I'll say like I think they've done a good job of introducing this King of the Ring and Queen of the Ring tournament as something that is different from prior iterations, where there's a lot more emphasis on like compelling matchups and delivering like pretty good matchups. Now, this is not the G1, everybody. It's not the Continental Classic even, but like for WWE Raw, like they've given us anticipated matches to look forward to, good storylines, good character build for all of them, and I think pretty substantial wrestling for the most part throughout the entirety here.
Yeah. And I think I don't mean to look too far ahead, but if past is prologue, then, you know, I think we know that the ultimate winner of the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments, it's not the biggest deal in the world. You know, it's not quite down there with the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, but it never is that meaningful once the tournament's all said and done.
It depends, though. You know, again, we're dealing with a bit of a different regime this time around. You know, it depends what they do with it. Now, again, they have not mentioned that the winner gets any sort of title shot. Only Gunther alluded to that like one time, as far as I remember, and it's not been mentioned since. And that kind of tells me that that might be as much as it is. But I think we'll see. We'll see what they do. You know, we know now there are crowns awarded to the victor, but what sort of added prestige, what sort of added push accompanies that crown? I guess we shall see. But looking at the brackets here, again, we've got Gunther versus Jey Uso next week. We've also got, Gunther versus Jey Uso in the semifinals, and then on the SmackDown side of things, I believe here, I'm going to just do this by memory, but help me out here. We've got Randy Orton, who defeated AJ Styles.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Let me see if I can get it.
Yeah, please. Sorry, I should have came a little bit more prepared. But we've got Carmelo Hayes taking on, I believe, Randy Orton coming up on Friday. And then we've got LA Knight versus Tama Tonga.
I believe that's true, Way. I'm sorry, I haven't quite got it in front of me. I thought there would be an updated bracket for me to...
Yeah. All right. So anyway, so that's sort of the update. And your thoughts overall on this edition of Raw?
I was again happy that I stayed up tonight to watch this edition of Raw, because I've seen so many, including I would include last week, apart from the Ricochet Ilja match that. I probably would say weren't worth staying up for. I think it's one of the better Raws we've seen in a while. In-ring quality, very, very good. Some great matches. Some nothing-y matches as usual, of course, but just there, you know, the Alpha Academy stuff, but just to kind of further the storylines there. And it's one thing I'm appreciating about WWE at the moment that I think we're probably on the same page here, Way. Weekly AEW television, I'm not saying it should be super angle heavy, but as they move to a pattern of more like monthly or almost monthly pay-per-views, they should be using their weekly television to further builds and storylines a little more. And I think WWE are doing that very well at the moment. You know, I'm liking all these digging into the past that, Dragunov had beaten Gunther, and I dare say they'll get there with Lyra as well, and her history with Becky at some point. I like that they're digging back, and it's not the old adage of no one remembers what happened last week. You know, who cares, sort of thing.
Well, let's think about like what are the big names we're talking about, you know, in this tournament. It's Ilja Dragunov. It's, I guess, you know, Lyra Valkyria up until, like she's heading to the semifinals. It's Jade Cargill. It could be Tiffany Stratton. These are all new names. And as like sort of a device to push a lot of your NXT up and coming talent, or just up and coming talent in the case of Jade, post draft, I think it's great timing for a King of the Ring. You know, when you're just talking about new people debuting on a roster every year. So I'm very much for this iteration of the King and Queen of the Ring. Let's see what the feedback says from the Post Wrestling Cafe. We open our feedback up to all of our patrons at patreon.com/postwrestling or postwrestlingcafe.com after every one of our shows. And let's start here off with Benjamin, who says, these matches were damn good. The King and Queen of the Ring explainer video packages were all really good, and the pace of the show only slowed after the Gable Zayn Otis segment, though Lynch and Kai were also good. The production, continuity, and video packages made the show really easy to watch and to stay tuned into. Drew McIntyre is still the MVP though, and Priest is feeling more comfy in his promos too. All in all, Raw doesn't feel like time wasted or lost anymore. I would love if the King or Queen of the Ring would also lead to a title shot at SummerSlam, give it even more stakes and purpose. As it stands, competitors wanting to win to level up their career, and because winning matters is enough already too. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. It would be nice to have like some reason why somebody would want to win this tournament. Now, at the same time, if we look at the King of the Ring or King and Queen of the Ring as a vehicle to push a new talent, like a Jade Cargill, like a Lyra Valkyria, you know, I don't know if you necessarily want such big stakes attached to it, you know, because they'll inevitably have to lose, you know, at least if they're just kind of starting off their main roster careers, if they're challenging for a world championship. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to make the eventual winner seem kind of like really cool. You know, we've only had one Queen of the Ring ever.
And she was not that cool.
That was awful, that gimmick with the accent and everything.
Yeah.
Back in 2021. And it's difficult to think of King of the Ring winners that really made the gimmick work other than possibly comedically for them. So, yeah, what is there for the eventual winner? I'm revisiting this again. I agree that it would be good to give them maybe, why not have like a mid-year, you know, title shot of your choice, you know, thing, because the winner will come from either Raw or SmackDown, but you know, they could perhaps open that up to, you know, you can challenge any champion you like or something like that. It'd be exciting.
How about a big cash prize, and then like they'll show us what the winner buys, like, you know, like, I don't know, a fancy car, or like I mean, just I don't know if we often use money enough as a motivator for, you know, people wanting to win these matches. Like, you know, maybe you know, Xavier Woods wants to, like, I don't know, buy his friend a house or something like that. Whatever. Okay, like that sometimes is enough than championships, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's go up next to Manny from Pacoima, who says, it's that man Wei Ting and Neal Flanagan, whose favorite food is lobster head. They're going to review Raw on this Monday night. Too many lines.
Thank you for reading that way. He wanted me to sing it, I think.
I did have lobster coincidentally today with my mom for belated Mother's Day lunch. So,
how was it?
Not my favorite, honestly. So much work for like not that much.
I find the same with lobster and crab. And I had a really fantastic seafood restaurant once on a visit to Cape Town in South Africa years ago. And this was a world-renowned place, and I was like, had this bib on and hammers and all sorts of things to try and get through it. It's just like, yeah, it's too much work for me.
There's a lot of like, I guess, status attached to it, and you know, like as a gift, I want to like, you know, treat my mom occasionally for like something like that. But it's like it's not my first choice of if I had a last meal, I wouldn't pick it. Lobster head? Do you eat lobster head?
No.
My dad loves lobster head. So I'm going to sing that song. I'm going to play that song next time I eat lobster with him. Never have I ever seen such a weak punch than the one Becky gave to Liv. Even my cats have swung harder on me. Lots of great matches tonight, and tonight also proved that Hunter can book more than one women's match on his 3-hour show that doesn't last 2 minutes. Speaking of the women, I think WWE might have spoiled the Queen of the Ring finals in some of their graphics. If it's true, it's still a match I'm looking forward to. I didn't notice, did you?
No, this is news to me.
Okay. Chat room, chime in if you caught that as well. If it's true, it's still a match I'm looking forward to. Unfortunately, not even Ilja could get a good match out of Jey. Oh, okay. Just pair him up with Fatu. Jacob made Zilla look like $1 million. I'm sure he'd definitely do the same for Jey. MLW delivered a fantastic show on Saturday with their Aztec Lucha card. Hope John feels better. Post wrestling, they not like us. They not like us. Neal, will you be traveling through the portal that connects Ireland to New York?
I don't know if you've seen this way.
I have, yeah.
The portal, I think it's been closed down. Now, I am reliably informed by Joycey, our mutual friend. And by the way, I'd just like to, on a personal note, to send my thoughts to the Joyce family. They've had a bereavement, and I don't know that he would thank me for bringing it up on this, but thoughts are with you, Joycey. Love you, man. He's a great guy. But he was telling me that they've closed this down and that it was situated in like one of the worst possible places, in one of the worst streets in Dublin they could possibly have put this portal. That it's a bit of a mecca for needleheads and heroin addicts at night time. And if you've been following this thing online, there are some very dark clips of what one side has been showing the other on sort of just holding up their phones.
You're kidding.
To the portal.
Wow.
At first, this thing was opened with like Irish dancers giving it a big, gala on one side, and on the other side, back in NYC, terrific, breakdancing and so on. And as the days wore on, more and more, nuisances were just coming up to it with their phone on porn or pictures of the Twin Towers on fire. Or you name it, it was just the worst. So yes, I believe the whole thing has been shut down. I don't know whether it's ahead of time, whether this was ever meant to be more than a few days of an art installation or what. But yeah, it is no more. So I can't go through the portal, unfortunately, Manny.
Leave it to the human race to turn a great idea into a perverse a public act. Well, there you go. No more portals, at least for the time being here. All right. Well, sorry. He's got actual feedback here. Sorry. We're up next to Jeremy in Texas, who says, Raw was a good show, but I can't get past having illegitimate media at press conferences. It is a detriment to true journalists' credibility and legitimacy. WWE is a bit different with it being entertainment, but it does not help when an executive like Triple H is combative when a serious question is asked. Then there was the UFC press conference from this past weekend. One female reporter asked Dana White if he could help arrange Donald Cerrone to brand her. Another media member asked for Dana White's autograph. It's really gotten out of hand. How did those types of reporters get credentialed? Should UFC media relations be stricter when vetting media to be approved for credentials? Should WWE clarify the purpose of its press conferences to be kayfabe or legit? Maybe this is more of a Pollock question. Get well soon, John. Any thoughts so far or from any of that, Neal?
I would apologize to Jeremy that I will not have the insight of, a full-time reporter like John, who attends press conferences when he can in this regard. In a previous life, though, and I'll not go on about this too far, I was a newspaper reporter that went to old-fashioned press availabilities, generally with political representatives. This is going back into sort of the late 2000s, 2008, 2009, that kind of period, with my notebook and shorthand. That's how old it was. I think the iPhone had just come out at this point, but I didn't have proper recorders and stuff. And so I have the experience of being at press releases or press conferences where there's absolutely no holds barred, particularly in politics. So this is a different beast. I know that it's a blend of entertainment and athleticism that we're seeing, but there's a real life element too when people are released and some of the more serious matters come up that we talked about at the beginning of the show. And Paul Levesque's a senior executive in the company who should be prepared to answer questions on those. And he could say, I'm the chief creative officer of the company. You're asking me about things that aren't really, he could at least address it in a different way than get annoyed. And at people when they don't sort of follow his little let's all have a rah-rah, post-show victory thing, sponsored generally by somebody. It's if there are genuine members of the press who want to ask, they should be able to ask whatever they want. And this was very, very well covered by Brandon and John on last week's Pollock and Thurston.
Yeah, I'll only comment on, so I did not watch that UFC press conference, but thank you, Jeremy, for that little recap of maybe some of the highlights, if you want to call it that. But as far as like how, quote unquote, reporters might get credentialed to some of these things, as far as I'm aware, I don't know if there's any sort of like, I don't know, sort of significant barometer other than the size of your platform and whether or not you are considered, I guess, a big enough sort of bridge, between UFC and a wide audience. As far as I know, that is largely kind of what is taken into consideration. And I don't think that really informs like the type of questioning that certain members of the media might ask. I think we should also say like certain members of the media aren't looking for hard-hitting journalistic questions. They might be looking for something ridiculous like, can Donald Cerrone brand me for their particular type of platform and their particular type of content. And I don't think like the WWE or TKO at this point, I don't know if they'd have any concern about policing any of that, like why wouldn't they want like something ridiculous and fun to be asked of them instead of like a hard-hitting question that might land them in some sort of like trouble. I just don't think that they hold those press conferences to any sort of like journalistic standard. At least I don't think it's in their interest to. So. No. All right, let's go up next to Muggin, who says, it's good that WWE realizes that certain matchups should be saved for later. Ilja Gunther in this case is a drag and I'm willing to chase till it happens. There's no shame in Ilja losing to Jey Uso. He's going to be fine. Priest and McIntyre is all but a lock for Glasgow. In the meantime, Strowman is a fine choice for Priest to defend the title against in Jeddah. Kofi Gunther was so well done. Did you get it? Oh, I guess Strowman being attached to the Judgment Day might lead you to that.
We did have the don't get into Judgment Day business interaction.
How would Braun just jump to a title challenge like that, though? I guess it's the WWE. There's no rankings, right?
That's true.
Like, it seems like to me he's more feuding with JD and not so much Damian. But obviously, you're right. Like, that could work its way out there. Becky Dakota was strong up until the finish. Lyra's not letting the rub she got from Becky 7 months ago to waste. And Io Shayna was a good test drive for a babyface run for Sky much, much later. Solid fun all around. It was also heartwarming to see Samantha give Lillian her flowers with that cameo.
True.
Yes, it was. Jay from Colorado. A lot of feedback today, as usual, with the Neal Flanagan show. So, as always, Neal, you're a draw here. Jay from Colorado. I thought it was an excellent show, but it bothers me more than it should that Adam Pearce gave the whole speech about only wanting the best of the best to compete in the King of the Ring and doesn't want to throw Braun Breaker in the deep end, being completely new to the main roster. But then the very next match is Lyra Valkyria versus Zoey Stark in the Queen of the Ring tournament. Maybe he doesn't mind throwing Lyra into the deep end, or did I miss something? Well, you could just say like Ilja Dragunov. Why is he thrown into the deep end?
Yeah, definitely. He's right. There's a disconnect there on the Braun front. It doesn't really make sense.
Oh, maybe he's hiding something else here. Adam Pearce. Lastly, let's go to Annie, who says, another terrific episode of Raw. Had a really good time with the show. This King of the Ring cycle has been electric, as this tournament and its various subplots have been varied and interesting. The unpredictability of the results have been a result of good booking. I prefer Dragunov losing clean and having to build himself back up instead of losing via shenanigans. Jey is going to serve as a villain of sorts for me in the final, as I fear he beats Gunther and gets his win back to set up a final versus Tama Tonga. Yeah, I didn't even ask you. Any thoughts on the outcome of Jey Uso versus Gunther next week?
My thoughts were Gunther wins. I didn't think of this, the Tama Jey possibility. So yeah, they could do that. But it's a tough one. I don't see without like some major interference or something huge happening to hand him the win that Jey beats Gunther.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if like Jey Uso versus Tama Tonga is really all that of an attractive matchup, either in ring or even like in terms of storyline. Obviously there is interaction between Jey Uso and the Bloodline, and maybe as recent as Jey Uso sharing that glance with Paul Heyman to possibly bring him into sort of the orbit of what's currently going on with the Bloodline.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel that big of a plot for me to see that being the final of this entire thing. Now alternatively, let's think about what the other matchups could be here. So Orton, Carmelo, LA Knight, Tama Tonga. Of those, who do you see making it to the final? I think Orton is always a big name. Carmelo Hayes is somebody that they clearly have high hopes for. But he's also a heel. I'm really picking Gunther to make it all the way to the end. I don't think you should burn through your Gunther losses that quickly, especially just after he lost to Sami Zayn.
Just perusing this, I see Gunther on the Raw side, and LA Knight possibly.
That's who I would suggest as well, because I think LA Knight can always at this point afford these losses. He's an attractive underdog. He's a big enough name to sort of be placed in the finals. Orton, of course, as well, would fit in that role, but I also think that they want to be a bit more careful about Orton's losses. So I could see LA Knight making it maybe to face. Well, maybe Orton gets cheated out of this match with Carmelo, or Orton loses to LA Knight somehow, and LA Knight goes to Gunther. That would be my pick.
Yeah, and I think on a really superficial note, they want the crowd in Jeddah to be shouting with LA Knight. They want that spectacle of him coming out and doing his promo. And
don't get me wrong, Orton versus Gunther would be a huge match too. No, that's a very big possibility as well. And that wraps it up for this edition of Rewind to Raw. Thank you for staying up very late here, Neal Flanagan, with us.
You're
a lot later than
welcome,
usual.
No problem, and I'm just very glad that I don't think it's me that brought the feedback. I think it was a genuinely good episode of WWE Raw on a Monday night. So I was happy to stay up for it.
And of course, again, we have ASK-A-WAI coming out this week in the Post Wrestling Cafe. We got Rewind to SmackDown with me and John Friday night after SmackDown, and that side of the brackets and the King of the Ring. And then we've also got Collision Course this weekend, and also MCU later happening in the Post Wrestling Cafe. Shout out to our sponsors, eBay Motors and also NordVPN, for their support of Post Wrestling. And we will catch you guys here for Up Next tomorrow. Take care. Any last words, Neal?
Just thank you and good night.
Bye-bye.